Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm thrilled to be on this committee. Mr. Secretary, thank you for your service and thank you for being here today. First question is, what's your level of confidence that Israel is in compliance with the Leahy Law?
To the best of my knowledge, they are, and certainly it's something that we take very, very seriously everywhere around the world. And when we do the necessary vetting for foreign military sales or others, one of the key things we look at is Leahy Law compliance. So, to the best of my knowledge, they are.
Thank you. I see that you have a new program, Strengthening Forest Conservation and Land Management Initiative, which is great. You know I care very deeply about international deforestation, especially commodity-driven deforestation. A kind of technical question. It's not obvious to me why you're dividing implementation between state and aid. So can you describe the theory of the case here?
I'm actually happy to come back to you on that and make sure that I give you a fully informed answer. I can say generally two things. One, we're deeply committed to this and appreciate the leadership that you've shown on it. Just as by way of example, President Lula, as you know, was in Washington just recently to meet with President Biden. One of the things we focused on, of course, was dealing with the deforestation of the Amazon and indeed hopefully dealing with the reforestation as necessary. We're committed to that. We'd like to actually contribute to the Amazon Fund, something we'll probably need to work with Congress on. But as to the allocation of resources between state and AID, you know, generally speaking, we are focused on, by we I mean the State Department, are focused on the policy and diplomatic aspects of working things. AID tends to implement, and it may be that the budget division reflects that, but I need to give you an informed answer, so let me come back to you.
Sure. Just on Lula, I think obviously there are incredible opportunities here, but it seems to me that we're not going to save the world's forests just sort of hoping for a bunch of Lulas to get elected across the planet. And so I think we do need to come up with an economic model. Lula's a willing, enthusiastic participant, but we have to make it worth it to their country so that other countries that are trying to figure out where to move economically, that they can see a pathway that works for them. So I agree with you about the deforestation fund, and whatever we can do to be supportive there, I'll try to help.
Thank you.
I welcome the budget's focus on democracy and human rights, and particularly robust funding for promoting press freedom. There's no dedicated envoy or office for press freedom, so how do you ensure that press freedom stays high on that list of priorities as your offices across the planet have so many things to contend with, and yet this seems to me to be part of the slide towards authoritarianism across the planet?
It really is front and center on the agenda for a number of offices at the department, and by the way, for me. So this is something I've spent some time on, including making sure that I was speaking up and speaking out on World Press Freedom Day, but also making sure that programmatically we are putting in place the resources, the tools to defend press freedom, and that's exactly what we've done over the last couple of years. It was a key feature, and will, by the way, next week will again be a key feature of the Summit for Democracy. It's one of the critical pillars in that. We put in place, for example, funds to help the press that is being assaulted with lawfare in various places be able to have the funds to defend themselves. We put in place resources to help protect journalists who are actually under physical threat. Senior officials in my department, particularly in the Bureau of Democracy and Labor, are this is right front and center on their agendas. So I can tell you that it's something that I'm personally focused on, and the critical bureaus in our department are focused on.
Thank you. Let's move to the Pacific. I'm glad to see a larger request from the Administration for Foreign Assistance for Pacific Island countries for fiscal year 23, but it's still short of the enacted level. And so could you speak to that, the dollar amount, but also I want to give you a chance to talk about what we're doing in the Pacific Island region, and I want to coach you a little bit, not that you need coaching, but I want to remind us that it is difficult to compete with graft, right?
Yep.
And so What we have to offer are, as you say, values, right, and relationships. And as I've talked to Pacific Island leaders, sure, they need resources, and especially in a climate change context, lots of these countries are really in need of our direct material assistance, but they also want to be respected as sovereigns. And so I'd like you to talk through how attitudinally we're shifting and not just throwing another, say, $80 million at the problem and then trying to park all of our military hardware wherever it's convenient on a map. These have to be a sovereign-to-sovereign relationship. I'd like you to talk to that.
So we've fundamentally elevated the Pacific Island countries in our foreign policy and in our diplomacy, and that really culminated with what was really, I think, a historic summit meeting between President Biden and the leaders of the Pacific Island nations, something that I took part in, and it really was an extraordinary moment because I think it said to them and it said to their people that the United States is engaged in a different way. And now that needs to manifest itself in concrete, practical ways. Our diplomatic presence, as you know, we opened in the Solomon Islands. We're looking at establishing 2 to 3 other embassies or outposts in the Pacific Islands where we've been absent for the last years. That is moving forward. It's also reflected in our budget. Our economic engagement, particularly in finding and catalyzing resources to deal with challenges that are affecting the lives of Pacific Islanders, that is front and center. As you know, it's an interesting challenge because in many cases, each individual island nation is small, and so making a market can be complicated, but particularly as they're pooled together and we're able to pool some resources, we're doing that. I think on climate, we have an absolute responsibility, and we're acting on it to try to provide the technical assistance, the technology, and, yes, the resources to deal with this, particularly for countries that literally risk not existing because of climate change. And, of course, programs that we have that are reflected in the budget for education, for governance, for building institutions, all of those are there. I'm happy to work with you and work with your team to make sure that we are properly resourced to do that, but this really is front and center in our thinking.
Thank you. Just one final thought on what's happening with climate. I think there are some cases, Kiribati is a good example, where they really might vanish.
Yeah.
But I think the less precipitous but just as bad scenario is saltwater inundation of the freshwater systems, of the irrigation systems. And so you can't drink water, you can't use water to farm, and then there's no economy at all. And none of these people have any place to go. So although I love what DFC is doing, and I love the opportunities to kind of envision economic growth, but the truth is some of these people need immediate assistance because they can't drink the salt water, and their runways are flooding. And so I think we need to race to their aid without precondition.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Secretary.